previously in regard to strategic airlines. I think there were some issues made it to the papers about that. But I think that the internal processes within the regulator actually addressed the timelines and the issues about that sort of thing. So I think if you've got a process that manages that sort of transition and you're dealing with people of integrity and say, I want to move and I'm thinking about applying to these operators, I need to be removed from dealing with them for the next period of time or whatever to avoid that appearance of conflict of interest, then I think that's an approach you can adopt. I don't know that necessarily saying to somebody you can't go and work for an airline of any sort for a year is appropriate. I don't think that it's necessarily appropriate to say you can't go and work for that airline because they did business with your office. I think you have to be able to manage those sorts of things in a transparent way. So perhaps it's something that the regulator. I'm not currently au fait with their internal procedures at the moment, but I do believe they have processes.
I mean, there are plenty of circumstances where, when people obtain a severance, that they agree not to work with a competitor, or when a business is bought out, they agree not to establish a business in a similarly competitive area, geographic area, or whatever. Shouldn't the public be able to rely on some sort of protections from what is the right of a person to take any employment that's offered, but in the same case the integrity of the system may be called into question because they do?
I guess the thing is there that if the government saw fit to put some form of regulation in place, then we'd all have to live with it in the industry. But our industry is quite small by world standards, so people of the skill set necessary are fairly few and far between. You could count them on one hand for some of the senior positions. So you might hamstring the industry from developing skills, but I'm very cognizant of the same as Captain McCarris said about the view of industry capture and the integrity of the people are concerned. I mean, the pilots regularly complain to me about capture, the big gorilla in the room, which is my airline, goes and lobbies and things get done. That's the view of some of the pilots. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I don't have a solution. I think that when you reach a certain level in this industry, because we're working in an industry that's trying to be safe, we all have a view of our own personal integrity that we'd like to think is adequate for the job.
So you don't think, I mean, we've discovered in recent months the Australian Navy is almost not a navy. Most of its ships are either got old or like unserviceable. But also the Air Force Reserve contains some active pilots of Qantas and other airlines who, in their reserve time, go and do check training, etc., for the Air Force. Is there anything that should be read into that, of lack of adequacy of the resources of the Air Force, or what do you make of that?
Oh, well, I was right at the leading edge of that when I left the Air Force. I was a staff officer here in Canberra, and I was a graduate test pilot. So when we went to get the tankers, the new refuelling tankers, I was the only heavy jet qualified test pilot the Air Force had, because I was currently flying 747, so they wanted me back to help. So I see that as a transfer of skills capability that the Air Force might not otherwise have. And because of the pyramid nature of the promotion system in the Air Force, that you've got to lose a certain bunch of people because there's no room at the top. They often lose the skill set, and because they've shrunk in size, they don't have the capability inherently internally. They're a very capable outfit, but they need some skills which the industry can supply, and I see that as a plus more than anything. I see transferring on reserve issues being an absolute plus for the industry.
But it'd be absolutely a sovereign issue, wouldn't it, to maintain, if that's what we need to do, that the Australian content of pilots, so that we can have the dual purpose of, Air Force Reserve?
Oh, absolutely. In the heady days when Qantas was a government airline a million years ago, I gather the government paid for part of the aeroplanes to make sure there was a strategic reserve of aeroplanes in case the Air Force ever needed to transport troops to and from A to B. Now, that's long gone because it's a privatised airline, but you can argue that the industry's got a core group of skills, and at all elements of the industry, be it manufacture, construction, or training, we've got to keep those core skills. And I think that was the core of our submission is we think parts of the industry are offshoring it to the detriment of the industry. I think I said in my last submission before you, the industry is killing itself from within, and I believe that to be the case in some parts of our industry. They're taking a very short-term view of their gains and the bottom line and not looking at the strategic nature of the industry.
Righto, I think we should conclude there. So we're very grateful for your evidence, and yes, we're looking for answers. Thank you very much. We've got these two lots up together, have we, or separately?
It might get really crowded.
Oh, bugger it, don't matter. So, I think it is proposed, according to the program, that Air Transport Safety Bureau and CASA come up together. Is that the understanding of?
Yes. That's what we've put in the program. Is that okay? You want to do it together?
You don't have to? So, whatever you reckon. Can you all fit?
Are you going to go on camera? Is there a chance of that?
Yeah, there is.
Okay, and will you want them both in the set?
Yeah.
It's just
They're
that...
going to camera now. Well, we'll get the opening statements out of the road, and then we'll say we propose to go in
You
camera.
give Senator a call. He can go to the
But I only want to go to jurisdiction and CASA report.
Can you say something? I suppose all I'm trying to do is as much of the evidence as possible before we start getting into
Can we do in camera at the end?
Rightio. Thank you very much. I welcome officers from the Civil Aviation Safety Authority and the Air Transport Safety Bureau, and I remind senators that the Senate has resolved that an officer of the Department of the Commonwealth or of a state shall not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and shall be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked of the officer to superior officers or to a minister. This resolution prohibits only questions asking for opinions on matters of policy and doesn't preclude questions asking for explanations of policies or factual questions about how and when policies were adopted. Officers of the department are also reminded that any claim that it would be contrary to the public interest to answer a question must be made by a minister and shall be accompanied by a statement setting out the basis of the claim. So if you'd like to give your name, rank and serial numbers in whatever order you like. Is there a pecking order?
Apparently. Mr John McCormick, I'm the Director of Aviation Safety, the Civil Aviation Safety Authority.
Martin Dolan, the Chief Commissioner of the Australian Transport Safety Bureau.
I think we'll just simplify it and go from the end so we won't worry about the pecking order. Who the hell are you?
Mr Patrick Hornby, Manager of Legal Services, ATSB.
Julian Walsh, General Manager Strategic Capability at the ATSB.
Terry Fulkerson, Deputy Director of Aviation Safety.
Jonathan Alec, Associate Director of Aviation Safety.
Good afternoon. Greg Hood, Executive Manager Operations for Civil Aviation Safety Authority.
And Peter Boyd, Executive Manager Standards Development and Future Technology Division.
Thank you very much. So you're the only lawyer, are you?
Yeah, you got me last time, Senator.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So, do you need to make any amendments to any submissions you've made, either CASA or Air Transport?
I think we've submitted ours, Senator, to the Chair.
So you don't want to amend anything. So would you care to make an opening statement, or both of you compare? We're quite relaxed about how you go about it.
Oh, thank you, Chair. And on behalf of CASA, thank you very much to the committee to appear here today. No, we don't have an opening statement to make at this stage.
I've got no amendments on behalf of the ATSB to make, Chair. There is one small comment I would like to make, having listened to a considerable amount of the evidence given to the committee. We drew attention both in our initial submission and in our answer to a question on notice from Senator Xenophon to the confidential reporting scheme that we administer. That scheme is explicitly designed to deal with a number of the circumstances that have been referred to this committee where people feel unable to bring safety matters internally to notice. And it's a scheme that gives pretty much absolute protection of identity to someone who brings a safety issue to the attention of the ATSB, and we will follow that up with whichever relevant organisation is necessary. It seems to me we need to do a better job of publicising the existence of that scheme and the very strong protection of identity that it gives, because it does offer at least one channel for people to raise those issues.
How are you proposing to do that? Obviously it's a very worthy thing to do. How would you do that?
We would intend, Senator, as I think we've briefed the committee, in the context of our issue of revised regulations on mandatory reporting, to make sure, as we explain to all those with the reporting responsibility what they must report to us, also the existence of a parallel protected scheme, and to give it a high level of publicity as far as that goes. And we would be more than happy to work with CASA also to make sure that gets around.
Chair, if I have the call, or
you do.
Right. Ms Dolan, you heard the evidence from AIPA, from from Captain Woodward about the incident involving the Jetstar aircraft in Darwin at the end of October, about the severe weather event.
Yes, Senator.
And quite explicitly, Captain Woodward expressed how the crew felt, that they thought they were, that it was a very serious incident. I note that the ATSB has decided not to investigate the event, that particular event. Again, there's no suggestion the crew behaved cautiously and appropriately from the information that the pilots union has provided. Is there any proposal, is there any consideration as a result of what you've heard today to look at that incident again in the context of air traffic control and the information given to crew at that airport?
Based on what I've heard today, Senator, I intend to make some further inquiries just to verify the information on which we made a decision that this did not require close investigation. The description of how the occurrence felt to the crew and the understanding that there was a point where there was not a positive rate of climb is not in the information that's currently available to us. As we understand it at this stage, there was always a positive rate of climb. How it felt at the time, clearly a wind shear incident of this significance is not going to feel at all comfortable to anyone flying an aircraft or the crew or indeed the passengers. But since there is such a clearly different perspective on it to what we understand, we will make further inquiries and then make a decision as to what we need to do.
Can you indicate whether the crew, the captain and first officer, were interviewed before a decision was made not to investigate the matter further?
We didn't interview them, Senator. We relied on the report we had available to us of the occurrence.
Sure. Is there an issue with air traffic controls generally that, as I understand it, the radar is there to provide details of separation between aircraft as distinct from providing details as to the weather? Is that, in terms of an operational sense, there's a focus there on air traffic control doing its primary job to separate aircraft, but that doesn't necessarily give you the best picture in terms of what is happening with the weather in the surrounding area?
It would seem, Senator, that there is a question as to what is the most effective way of getting current and reliable weather information to the crew of an aircraft.